I'd like to talk a little bit about the EQ function on the SB1000. It's a very robust EQ. It has all the basic functions, just graphic equalizer if you want to go into the basic side. But if you go into the advanced side, it's a little bit more complex and gives you more control. And I really like that side because it's basically what's called a parametric EQ. You can adjust the width, you can adjust the frequency. They're prefixed frequencies, but there's enough of them that you can hit some sweet spots or any resonant peak or anything in a headphone or an earphone. If you look at the equalization file that I did on the SB1000 for the Layla AION, you'll see that there are quite a few frequencies in there. And if you were to look at it on the graphic side, it looks a bit extreme, but if you actually look at it on the parametric side, there's only plus or minus 5 dB on equalization filters, so that's not a huge amount of cut or boost. On a professional equalizer, you usually get plus 12, minus 12. So on the graphic curve, it looks a little bit more dramatic than it actually is. But the reason that I created an equalization file for the Layla is that every passive headphone, every passive earpiece on the planet can use some sweetening, because a passive crossover, we can get really close to having it dialed in, but there's always going to be a 20 or 25% factor that if you had, precise equalization, you can make the earpiece sound sweeter. So if you were to look at the filters that I put into the Layla, I basically took the frequencies that I could not control with the passive crossover, a little 8K where the S's and T's, the sibilances are. I added more bottom end to it so you can set the bass attenuator about 1 o'clock and have some punch to it, because the Layla isn't a heavy bottom end earpiece. So I added it in, turned the attenuators down to 1. So if somebody did want a punchy bass, they can turn it up and get a little bit more punch. Then I also took a little bit of the masking frequencies out at 180, brought the vocal forward a little bit between 500 and 700, and brought up some of the air above 14K. So these are all things that you can do with the equalization in this SB1000 and sweeten up an already really good sounding headphone or a really good sounding earphone. So you can take this Layla file that I've done and adjust it up or down. You can change how wide the equalization is. You can boost it, or you can cut it, or you can take it out completely if you don't like what I've put in there. But I basically have positioned those filters in that earpiece so that you can cut or boost them, make them narrower or wider to your own taste. The other thing that I'd like everyone to know is that this equalization file will translate across all of the Laylas, no matter what version was built, because we've been very true to the frequency response and the tonality of the original Layla. We have not changed it. So if you have a full metal jacket, you have a custom Layla, or you have the new version of Layla AION, you can basically use this file between any of those earpieces. And like I said, these are the equalization points in the earpiece that can be adjusted that I couldn't adjust with a passive crossover. So, like I said, use them. They're like salt and pepper. They're like spice. Use them accordingly. The one that I really do like is I do like the 8K notch at the S's and T's. If that's the one, if I took every one of those filters away, that's probably the one I would put in there. It's subtle, it's only 3 dB deep, but it just takes a little bit of sparkle off of that sibilance up there. So this is basically your graphic equalizer. And you can see, like I said, it's got a little bit of a radical look to it, but if you realize that this is 0, that's +5, and that's -5, that's not a whole lot. In a professional equalizer, like I said, it would be 12 dB, it'd be another 7 dB here, another 7 dB there. So this is a very kind of subtle equalization, even though it looks a little radical. So basically, if we go into the advanced side, you can see down here that you have different filters. So that's 30 hertz, 45 hertz, 60, 90. So you can see that I've got 30 hertz bumped up 5. And this is the gain. And this is fractional gain, like hundredths of tenths of a decibel, but we don't really need that. This is, we're doing fine here. So, and this is the Q, which is the actual width of how the wide or how narrow the EQ filter is. So let's go up to, let's go to one of the filters that I'm not using. So we're going to go to 2K, and if it'll go there. Okay, 2K. So I'm going to boost this thing 5 dB. So if I go this way, you're going to see the filter rise. And it's at, the Q's at 3, right? It's kind of narrow, so I'm going to show you something here. So let's go all the way up to +5. Okay, so we've got maximum boost at +5 at 2K. So now what we have is we have a 3.0 Q, which is pretty narrow. So now if I go to the right and I go up to 4, you can see how it tightens that Q at 2K. So the center frequency is 2,000, 2K, 2,000 kilohertz, and then, or 2,000 hertz, excuse me. And then what we do here is we go to the left, what we're going to do is we're going to widen that filter with the Q. So if you go all the way down here to 0.1, you can see that that boost is probably starting right around 800, and that whole filter is a very wide filter. So from 1K to 4K is going to be boosted with around the 2K frequency. So that's very important to remember. This is the width of the cut or the boost. So I'm going to make it very narrow again, and then now I'm going to sweep this down, okay? Now the other thing I'm going to, and you can see how this comes down. All right. So the other thing that you can do, and I use this in a live engineering, is you can use the filter to kind of find, if you hear something in the frequency response of a headphone or earphone that you don't like and you don't have an analyzer, what you can do is you can basically think, okay, well, it's up in the S's and T's, or let's say it's up, let's say we think it's like at 4K. So what you can do is you can do it very narrow, so you take it all the way to the right, and then we go to 4K. Let's go to one I'm not using here. Let's say that you got a little bit of it sounds, it sounds very kind of low MIDI or something like that. So what you can do is you basically, while you're listening to the music, you're using the EQ, you basically, if you boost this thing and you boost it up, like I said, let's get this down to, let's go to 4. You do it narrow, and then you boost it, and if you listen for the frequency that's bothering you while you're listening to the track, and you'll hear that frequency go up. Now, if this isn't the frequency, you take it back to 0, and then you just, on a normal console, you can sweep the frequencies, but you can't do that with this. But then you just go to the next one, or like, okay, you go here and you go, okay, then you boost it and you go, oh yeah, I set it for narrow and boost it. And if you hear that frequency that's bothering you increase, that's you're right on the frequency. Then you just, you basically, you find the frequency, and then you basically cut it to your liking. So then I'll take it and let's say I'll knock it down, 2, 3, maybe 4 dB, and then you kind of adjust that. Then you're listening to the tracks that you're listening to. So on any headphone, you can go through the frequencies. If there's something that's sticking out, you boost it, and once you get that frequency on that and you boost it, that will jump out of the frequency response, and then you just cut it. So that's just something that we used to do when we were equalizing inputs on a mixing console, and it works very well on the output of a headphone or the output of a speaker or anything like that. So just an old audio trick.